The people's idolatry, their worship of things other than God, came at the high cost of the lives of their sons and their daughters. And to express just how repulsive such practices were, God states that it never entered his mind to decree such a thing. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, what about that time God told Abraham to sacrifice his son? God said, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and present him as a burnt offering on the mountain in which I will show you. And so Abraham takes Isaac to Mount Moriah. How is it that God can say that such a decree, such a command never entered his mind when he told Abraham to do that very thing? Well, if you recall, what happened on Mount Moriah? God didn't sacrifice Abraham's son. He spared Abraham's son. As that knife was about to come down, the angel of the Lord stopped Abraham. For now I know that you trust God. What actually takes place on Mount Moriah is the sparing of Abraham's son. And rather than promoting child sacrifice, which many of the peoples of the time were practicing, God makes it emphatically clear to Abraham that he does not desire such a thing. He abhors it. And he even supplies a substitute in Isaac's place, a ram caught in a thicket. Even Israel's sacrificial system testified to this very thing, that God didn't desire human sacrifice. The people deserved God's wrath due to their sin, yet God supplied animals as substitutes because the idea of human sacrifice was so abhorrent. Why? Because to sacrifice, to slay another human being, was to slay the very image of God. And yet here, the people of Judah have abandoned this God who places the highest dignity possible on human life. And instead, they've chosen to worship idols, gods of wood and stone, at the cost of their sons and daughters. We'll look at Ben Hinnom Valley and the horrific idolatrous sacrifices performed there from another angle when we get to chapter 19. But for now, it's important for us to come to grips with the fact that idolatry is seldom, if ever, relegated alone to the idolater. Realize this: Judah's idolatry led to the death of countless innocent children. And before we think that we are off the hook, that we're not sacrificing our sons and daughters to the fires of hell, over the past 50 years, we have a portrait of what our idolatry has caused to. Now, I'm not here to start a political debate, but as a teacher of God's word, I'd be remiss if I did not address the most obvious parallel taking place in Topheth with that of our own. To date, in the U.S. alone, an estimated 65 million innocent unborn children have been slaughtered in their mother's womb at the cost of our idolatry. Yes, our idolatry. You see, what's at the heart of abortion rights is worship. And by no means the worship of God. Rather, we worship the God of sex so we don't abstain until marriage. We worship the God of ease so we shirk any responsibility. We worship the God of unrestraint so we seek to remove anything or anyone who might restrict us from chasing our own dreams. We worship autonomy so we loudly and proudly proclaim, I will decide what is good and evil for myself. That's what happened in Genesis 3. These are but idols we are sacrificing our children to. 2 years ago, when Roe v. Wade was being looked at to be overturned in the Dobbs decision, 500 female athletes filed a petition with the Supreme Court to state their concerns. One of these athletes mentioned how she had accidentally became pregnant. Now, I need to pause and mention, from a Christian perspective, from a Christian worldview, there is no such thing as accidental pregnancy. God didn't make his good gifts of sex and procreation to be divided. Anyway, this athlete goes on to say, I was just starting to succeed in my sport, and I didn't want to take a year off. She mentions that her decision to have an abortion allowed her to take control of her own future, which led to 2 Olympic gold medals. So worshiping the gods of human autonomy, athletics, and accolade, they came at the high cost of the child in her womb. Unless it seemed like I'm singling out women in this, there was a ungodly, idolatrous male on the other end of this who put her in this position. For most of us, we probably aren't performing our sacrifice at the hands of a physician's knife. But don't be so quick to think that our idols don't come at the high cost of others. Whatever it is that you and I might worship, whether success, sports, sex, or our own perceived sovereignty, they all come at a cost. And not just to ourselves, but to others. And for that reason, God cannot stand by and let it continue indefinitely.